LA Progressive friends and family. I'm so delighted to have with me today Marcela Miranda-Caballero and Chrys Harris. I met Chrys recently at an event that was convened by the California Progressive Alliance. And Chrys was at a table for ranked choice voting. And it's something that as a progressive, we should all know about ranked choice voting. We should understand how it is that ranked choice voting affects us. And then Marcela Miranda Caballero also presented at that conference, at that convening on the topic of ranked choice voting. So I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us the role that you play with CalRCV.org and what motivated you. So Marcela, why don't we begin with you? Tell us your role and what motivated you to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the executive director here at CalRCV. I know for long it's California Ranked Choice Voting Institute or Coalition. We have a C3 and a C4 arm, depending on the work that we're doing. I started about 8 months ago, so I'm really excited to be here, part of this organization. I actually don't come from the electoral structural reform space. I come from the campaign world. I've ran campaigns for local efforts and then also congressional efforts. I'm actually based in San Diego County, and I've actually worked on both sides of the aisle. And really, what prompted me to get involved in this space is the fact that I myself am a dreamer. I live in a mixed status household, and it's actually what prompted me to get involved in politics to begin with 11 years ago. And like I said, having worked on both sides of the aisle, I could tell you for a fact that it's not the apples that are on, it's the barrel. It's a system that we're working on that needs to be changed. If not, we're going to continue having the same outcomes even if we're electing sometimes different people. And so really, I'm tired. I think like many voters across the country, and just folks in general, right? It doesn't just have to be voters, of seeing all this talk but no action. For me, particularly, it's immigration reform, what I'm passionate about. But it really comes down to all policy issues, right? There's a lot of things there's a lot of gridlock, and there's a lot of things that are not happening. Sometimes either it's locally, countywide, or even on a national level. And so I'm really um, empowered and confident that this is one of the systems that we could use, that could really benefit all of us, because it's going to change the way we elect folks. It's going to change the way we campaign. It's going to remove those negative campaigns that we are used to seeing that are so toxic, and really get folks to start talking about important policy issues, whatever those policy issues are for their platform. But it's really a step in the right direction and where we need to be taking our country.
Great, great. Well, thank you for that. Chrys, how did you find out about ranked choice voting and give us a little bit of your background and what motivated you to get so involved?
Sure. So in 2016, I'll just say it. I woke up when Bernie came around. Okay, and I hadn't really paid very much attention to politics until that time, and then I suddenly realized, wow, just like so many people. And then when he lost, those of us who were all campaigning for him, we continued to fight for issues like especially Medicare for all. And we fought and we fought, and we kept getting the same results where the rug kept being pulled out from underneath us. And I just felt like I was hitting my head against a brick wall trying to get change. I mean, they wouldn't even vote on it. They would not even allow the vote for the CalCare and things like that. And so I came to realize that even though we have people who probably, elected officials who might have good intentions and stuff, in some ways it seems like their hands are tied or something like that. And I think that it's the system that is tying them. And so, 2 years ago was when I just was like, enough. I can't fight for these issues anymore and just keep having this happen. I'm going to fight for ranked choice voting. Who's doing that? And that's when I found CalRCV, California, the long name, CalRCV. And yesterday I was tabling at a place, and something really struck me that I had heard, and then I started telling other people. It's like when you have an election that has like 11 candidates and it's plurality voting, then you know um, only 11% can be more than all the other candidates get. 11% can win that election. That means 89% of the voters didn't even vote for the person who won. And then also, in order to keep their job, that person only needs to please the 11% to get reelected. So now it all comes clear of why aren't elected officials really responding to us? Well, because their concern is just to keep their little voter block happy, and it's not the majority of voters. So that's why, and that's why I continue to be very passionate about it and go out in 108-degree weather and table.
Oh my gosh, talk about commitment. Now, Marcela, for the people who are watching that have never heard of ranked choice voting, can you give us an example or an explanation for how it works?
I should unmute myself. Yeah, so for those of you who haven't heard ranked choice voting, it's also usually called instant runoff voting. So if you haven't heard the term RCV, maybe you've heard IRV. But essentially, with ranked choice voting, you have to win with more than 50% of the vote. So kind of teeing off of Christine's point of some candidates sometimes win with like 20% of the vote, which means, the rest of the electorate, the other 80%, is not necessarily satisfied with the person that won. Here with ranked choice voting, because you actually get to rank your candidates from your favorite candidate to your least favorite candidate, you are actually partaking in an exercise now that where you have more power over who's getting elected. One, because the majority winner wins, this time 50% plus one. And second, because now you get to rank all the candidates in the race. You might have that favorite candidate that you love, and then you might have that candidate that maybe doesn't 100% align with all your policy platforms likings, but it's very close to it. So that could be your second choice. And then your third choice is the person that you could tolerate, right? Still not really close to your policy, but somewhat close. There's some mirroring things there that you can find in common. And then your fourth and your fifth choice are usually the people that you're not too fond of or that you really, dislike at that point. But technically, you still have more choice, which is key here, right? You have the choice to rate these candidates. And the way this works too is in the first round, if you don't win this 50% plus one, the last vote getter gets eliminated from that first round, and those votes get redistributed. All the people who voted for their second choices, those votes get redistributed to the other candidates in the second round until someone gets that 50% plus one. It could be that it happens, like I said, in the first round. It could happen in the second round. It could happen in the third or the fourth round. But it's the same process, right? The last vote getter always gets eliminated, and their votes get redistributed into the other candidates that are left over because you rank those candidates. So again, the keyword here is choice. People have the choice to vote for other people. I know sometimes people are caught up in the ballot box and they say, oh, now I have to choose between the lesser of two evils. They feel pressured because now they're like, well, I don't like either one of these candidates, but maybe one of the candidates they did love, got voted off in the primary. A great example of this is our Senate race earlier this year. We had all these great candidates. We had Barbara Lee, we had Katie Porter, and a lot of people didn't get to vote for them because, there was this big Democrat who ended up funding the Republican to get him through that top two primary. And so now people are stuck with, well, now I have to vote for the Democrat if I identify with Democrat, even though I don't really like this candidate, or it's choosing the other party, right? If I don't identify with that party. So you really get rid of that type of example of a race, because now instead of going through all that, you're able to rate all those candidates. So if you love Barbara Lee, you could rate her number one, you could rate Katie Porter number two, and then so forth, right? You go from there. But that's a perfect example of where ranked choice voting would have been fantastic to use because you wouldn't have to been choosing. So maybe what some people think the lesser of two evils, right? So that's why ranked choice voting is important because you have more choice, you have more voice, is what I like to tell people.
So just to make this perfectly clear, when ranked choice voting is used, people don't have to keep coming back and voting again, right?
They
So they
don't.
just
They
so
don't,
the
and
ranking
the
is done
software,
in
yeah,
the
and
software.
the software that we have automatically does the tallies for you. So
Great.
because you're ranking from the beginning, you don't have to go back into the ballot box. So if the first round goes through and nobody gets that 50% plus one, rest assured that your second choice vote, if it gets eliminated on the first round, is going to get redistributed to the other candidates depending on how you ranked folks because you already did it. But this is a system that does it already. You don't have to worry about coming back in. It's very, user friendly. What I tell people all the time is we end up ranking things all the time on our daily lives. We're choosing something off of Amazon, what pot we're gonna buy for our kitchen or whatever it may be. And so you're looking at all these different ones and you're like, well, I like that one best, but it might be a little pricey, but I still, it's my top choice. And then you go down from there. So, people are ranking stuff all the time. I tell folks, the same ballot errors that we get with our, regular plurality voting ballots that we have right now are the same ballot errors that happen with ranked choice voting. Because people sometimes like to say, well, people are going to get confused. In fact, sometimes when people are voting with the current electoral system right now, they're actually the reason why there's errors in those ballots is because people are ranking folks. And so they're already trying to do this exercise without knowing. So it's once you explain to people, hey, this is how you vote on a ranked choice voting ballot, and you show them that ranked choice voting ballot, it's like, oh, it's something snaps, and they're like, got it. We know how to do this now. So counter to what everyone says, it's easy to use once you get that first explanation. I've been doing several presentations recently because we have two campaigns going on right now in Northern California. And once I go through that first presentation, people are like, "Oh, we get it now. Okay, we could stick with something like this. We could use something like this."
So Christine, I noticed that you laughed when Marcela said because people are already trying to do ranked choice voting. Can you tell us about some of the conversations that you have when you're out there tabling? You were saying you were tabling yesterday. I know you were tabling last week. What kinds of conversations are you having with people?
Um, so the first thing that I would say is that 99% of the people I talked to didn't know what ranked choice voting was. That was our first question. Have you heard of ranked choice voting? No, what is that? So that's our big, that was the first thing, was they didn't even know, had ever heard of it. And that, I hadn't really even heard of it until 2 years ago. And then when I explained it to them, exactly what Marcela just went through, every single person got it, and I would say our rate of people signing up to say that they support CalRCV and ranked choice voting was about, I'm going to go with like 95%. One of our one of our volunteers, Mallory, she actually went over to the tables for Brad Sherman and Jesse Gabriel, and the interns signed up for that. So that was kind of cool. It was like, oh, the incumbents interns are even signing up for ranked choice voting. So people get it, that the nature of the conversations have been like, as Marcela was saying, just like, oh, okay, all right, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of that's mathematically sensible. Yeah. And my own personal experience too at the ballot box, when especially there was the recent, remember the recall for Gavin Newsom, and there was like
Yes.
25 candidates, and you actually had several pages of candidates, right? It really was mind-boggling to me that you could only pick one. And I wouldn't be surprised if you saw people,
Yeah.
they pick more than one,
Ranking.
because it was like, is this is the same race?
Yeah, that's interesting. So when people come up to you and they're signing up to join the mailing list. What is it that they're signing up for at the table?
Well, yes, yeah, we explained to them that they're going to get 5 emails, explaining what ranked choice voting is and what's going on in the world with ranked choice voting. If they check off the box that, that do you want to volunteer, we're going to be contacting them to ask them to volunteer, donate. If there's another box that says speaker, and if they check that box, if that means they have a group that they're with and they'd like us to send a speaker to go over there and educate them. Because at this point in time, our focus is in educating the public, but we also are focusing on smaller governments, on more local governments. So if you're in a zip code where, like, Marcela was talking about, there's some campaigns happening right now in Northern California. There's also one down in Carlsbad, as actually, so there's, even though Los Angeles is still, we still got some work, some ways to go. There's these smaller governments, that if you're in that location, especially, we might be, phone banking to you to say, hey, can you say something to your representative, because they have a vote coming up of whether or not they're going to adopt ranked choice voting. And that was
Ah,
actually something very successful with Redondo Beach, as a matter of fact. We managed to,
interesting.
yeah.
Interesting. So we would want people that are watching this video that are interested in signing up, they would go to calrcv.org.
That's
Yes, that
correct.
is correct.
Okay. So Marcela, can you tell us about Chrys just mentioned that there are other races. I know that other states have used ranked choice voting. I heard
Mhm.
about Alaska. I think in Alaska, because of ranked choice voting, our favorite Alaskan vice presidential Sarah Palin lost. She was attempting, so
That
she didn't quite make it. Can you where some of the other states that use this?
Yeah, totally. So right now, ranked choice voting is being used by more than 11 million people. So it's not a
Oh,
new phenomenon. Like Chrys says, when she tables and when we table, there's a lot of people that don't know about ranked choice voting, at least here, maybe in some of the jurisdictions that we're working on. But it is this new thing. It's widespread. It's going to be on the ballot this year on several states. But just to recap real quick, so the two states that have it right now are Alaska and Maine. And it's going to be, there's active campaigns this year for Oregon on the statewide ballot. Nevada is another one. Idaho, Washington, D.C. right now is pending certifications because they were signature gathering. And so they should know in the next like 2 weeks, but it will most likely be on the ballot from the last article that I read. And then Colorado as well. So there's several campaigns, active campaigns, and I tell people on the ground too, and a lot of elected officials like, hey, it's this widespread movement. It's going to be coming to California on a statewide level at some point. Let's make sure that you're at the forefront of it as opposed to on the back front and trying to play catch up, because we're not the first ones to we don't want to be the last ones to be adopting something like this. So yeah, there's all these places that are now using it. It started in 2004 with San Francisco. As you know, the Bay Area now has, Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, Albany, Eureka. We now, and here in California, Redondo is going to be using it for the first time this year.
that's
And
exciting.
then, yeah, and so it's really exciting to see how it's spreading slowly but surely. I think our goal as an organization is really bottom up, not top down. So we want to make sure that it's local jurisdictions, even if they're on the smaller level, that are starting to implement ranked choice voting, so that when the time comes for a statewide initiative, several people are familiar with it and they're like, oh, we've used this before. We like it. We like what it's done to our city or to our county, depending on what the jurisdiction is. So that's kind of the game plan, right? Is making sure that people know what's going on in their community, and then having them use the system before we say, hey, let's start gathering signatures for a statewide ballot initiative. Because at that point, it's like you're not consulting anyone or talking to the community, which is the most important part of it. Alaska specifically, as you mentioned, Sarah Palin lost. Sarah Palin lost because she didn't pick up anyone's calls when we offered to do candidate trainings. And so she campaigned, which is the usual way of campaigning. But with ranked choice voting, there is a candidate training that, we offer to everyone because campaigning does change a bit. And because you want sometimes those second or third choice votes, you want to build coalitions with other candidates. And she was not coalition building. So it's a result of some of those things, right? Where she didn't follow what not the rules, but some of the campaign styles that you should use when you're doing ranked choice voting. From what I've seen, like on mail pieces from other candidates that have run ranked choice voting campaigns, they're doing coalitions with somebody else who's running in the same race and saying, vote for me number one, but vote for so and so number two, and then that second the number two per mail piece where it says vote for me number one and vote for her number two. So we want to make sure that we're emphasizing those coalition building, so that we're getting rid of that negative toxicity that we're used to on campaigns where we're mud throwing at one another and
I
trying to bring
love
down,
it.
yeah, the people that are running with us.
That's so, I hadn't even really thought of one of the huge benefits is that the candidates develop coalitions. And so it's not mudslinging and, I'm the best and this other person is crap.
Yes, yes. And so if I can, after I will send you a picture of some of the mail pieces, examples that we've seen just from
I love
actual
that.
races, because it's really exciting to see how the coalition building gets done. And I think there's a lot of concern sometimes in newer cities because they're used to running races a certain way, and what I mean by that is like stakeholders, whether they're consultants or maybe labor unions or certain parties. They're like, well, how are we going to continue campaigning if now there's this coalition building aspect? And really, nothing changes except for there's that coalition else to vote for you, number one, two, or three, whatever it may be, right? Where you're knocking on doors now, you don't have to skip a house and say, well, that person's not registered to my party, or they're not necessarily part of my universe. You can still knock on the door and say, hey, I know that you might not be supporting me. I'm not your top one choice, but maybe you could consider voting for me second or third. Because like I said, when you're going through those rounds, you might accumulate enough votes to make it past that 50%. And that's what ultimately takes you past the finish line. So what I like to tell candidates is now you want deep and broad support, where now in our races, you either have deep support but not broad support, or you have broad support but not deep support. Now you need both, right? You need to really, I wouldn't even say reach across the aisle, but really reach out of that comfort zone and say, talk to people. And what's fascinating about all this is when the ranked choice voting tabulations come in, you can see as a candidate where you peeled off votes, right? Who ended up voting for you and who, what party they were from, and, all that information that you need. And so it's really insightful as a candidate, even if you end up losing, saying, oh, these people were talking about these issues and I wasn't, or something like that. Like you really can derive more from that, I think, than just regular polling, because a lot of candidates do polling, but you only get a certain picture of it, right? And sometimes people lie on polls and just things shift so quickly. But with this information, you could say, maybe next time I run, I know that I need to emphasize these issues in this specific community because they care about the potholes, or they care about funding for parks and recs, or whatever it may be.
This is such good news. Marcela and Chrys, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that we'll get together again sometime soon after the election, and I want to keep up with what's happening with the rest of the states and find out how much this is growing, because this sounds like an excellent opportunity for us to really change. And Chrys, I'm going to take your metaphor you talked about. It's not just a bad apple in a barrel, it's the barrel itself.
Hmm.
So
Totally.
I like it. I like
Yeah,
it.
we would love to come back and talk to you once the election is over and see which states, one passed it statewide and how things are going. And then we also have 2 active campaigns right now, one in Richmond, up in Northern California, and then Santa Clara County. If Santa Clara County passes, it's going to be the first county in California to use ranked choice voting. So would love to update you all on how that's going and the implementation process and whatnot. So yes, we would love to come back and talk to you again.
Okay, thanks so much. So long.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.